Welcome to lecture number 6, Judaism. Father Abraham, or Father Abram to start off, originally from an area of modern-day Iraq, was called by the Lord God to go and leave his father's house for a new land that the Lord God would show him. The blessing of children. This initial call of Abraham is the birthing of the Jewish people, for with the calling of blessing and showing Abraham glimpses of the promised land, there was also the calling of progeny. Abraham was to have descendants as numerous as the sands on the seashore. Sarah, Abraham's wife, was to conceive a son who was to be the guardian of the covenant, and although Abraham also fathered Ishmael, it was through Sarah and their new son Isaac that the chosen people were formed. Genesis 22, Crisis of Faith. Please read this text as part of your class materials. This initial promise of progeny is the key theological problem for Judaic understandings of Genesis 22, the sacrifice of Isaac story, or pericope. In Genesis 22, all of Judaism, the future 12 tribes of Israel, hung in the balance. Would Father Abraham act in such tenacious and loving fidelity to Yahweh that he would actually murder his own son if the Lord God called Abraham to make this ultimate sacrifice? Atonement, although later Christian biblical interpretation could potentially see a foreshadowing of Christ in the sacrifice of Isaac story, for the Jewish reader, such a heroic act of trust on the part of Abraham was horrifying to behold. What if Father Abraham had actually sacrificed his son? There would be no Jewish people. But as the text unfolded, Abraham, having passed this act of utter trust and loving fidelity to Yahweh, was given a ram to sacrifice instead. Blessings. Abraham, having passed this test of faith, thus became the model of faith for all future generations, both Jewish and Gentile alike, for as Genesis 12:3 stated, all families of the earth would be blessed by Father Abraham. If Abraham and his descendants are blessed, then so also would non-Jews be blessed in return. But the corollary was also true. If the Jewish people were cursed, for example, the Holocaust perpetrated by Nazi Germany, then the curse of Yahweh was to fall upon these people who failed to honor and bless the chosen people. And sure enough, Hitler and the Nazis, at least his closest leaders, all died by suicide. And many of the war criminals were eventually found. Faith and law. Following the initial covenant of faith, Judaism is perhaps best described as a series of overlapping covenants, covenants of law, Moses, and also covenants of recommittal, Joshua, son of Nun. The covenant of law, Torah, is perhaps what modern Christians think of as being all that Judaism comprises. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet, honor your father and your mother. Faith. But although the law is part and parcel of authentic Judaism, one must never cease to equate Israel with the covenant of Abraham, for it was through Abraham and his act of complete faith that the entire Jewish people were born. And for later Christians, it was through this faith of Abraham that the Messiah, Jesus Christ, would also be born. In conclusion, it's best to think about Judaism as a family rather than a legalistic religion. Judaism traces not only religious beliefs, but also their entire lineage all the way back to Father Abraham. Father Abraham, the father of the Jewish people, the father of Christianity, and also eventually the father of the Islamic tradition as well.